And welcome back. Following my last week's video, which you will find over here, in which I went pretty hard on Fujifilm because of the status of the system, which I'm concerned with, this video is going to be some kind of a bounce back video in which I will balance things out, not because someone asked, not because I felt like I needed to, but it's just because this is what I think about the X-H2s specifically, as you've learned from the title, in my 2 years experience with this camera as my workhorse camera that I've used for pretty much everything you can think of. In this video, I'm going to tell you why, despite the camera being 2 years old, and a flagship camera should never be considered old only after 2 years, but why, after 2 years from its launch, this camera is still up to the competition, and for the most part is still better than the competition, despite the new models that the competition has pushed out. And this time, I want to start with the thing that I don't like first, to kind of guide you through the things that to me stand out and why this camera is better than its competitors. So let's start with things that I don't like about this camera. And there's not that many, but still, after 2 years, there's a couple of things that I didn't get used to and which I think Fuji should correct in the next one. First of all, let's start with the front and back real dials. All the Fujifilm cameras have had these dials to be clickable, to be able to rotate through the different settings you can get with these dials. With the X-H2 and X-H2s, Fujifilm went away from that, and these dials are not clickable. Now, of course, they came up with the explanation saying that this makes the camera more robust and more weather sealed. But also, despite the camera being a big departure from the Fujifilm design cues in general, this is an important way of handling the cameras and changing the parameters. I would love for these things to be clickable. And after 2 years, I still haven't gotten used to it because I have 11 years of previous experience with clickable dials. So Fujifilm, if you're listening, the next camera, make those clickable so that we can go back to the way we're all using this camera. The lack of a quick toggle between photos and videos. I already mentioned that in my review video. That would be super clutch. It proved to be super clutch for me on the X-T4, and I would have loved to have it with this camera as well, especially considering this camera has 7 custom mode. If you could switch between photos and videos, that would give you basically 14 custom modes, 7 for video and 7 for photos, which would be more than anyone can ever think of needing. So that would have been a great thing, especially because I love to work when I go hybrid. I have my preset for both photo and video. If I have custom one and I can switch between photo and video with preset settings that I know are paired, like landscapes and vlogging for landscapes, high ISO video and photos, all of these things, it would be super clutch. The stabilization is good, is very good, it's the best that Fujifilm has, but it's not up to the competition, especially if you think about Panasonic. But even Sony, with the latest cameras, have come up with a better stabilization. I believe Canon does it good, and Nikon does it good as well, but I haven't tried those, so I cannot speak for those. Again, not dramatically, not bad, but still could have been a little bit better, especially on like movement that you want to make. The rear monitor right here is very good, but I still think that they should have gone with the A7R5 type of monitor. And granted, the A7R5 came out later, but the thing is, Fujifilm had that thing in the entry-level X-T100. That's the thing that bothers me. They had the perfect solution in their hands and they went away from that. I don't know why, but I would have hoped to have that kind of flexible solution that would have made everyone's happy. Photographers, videographers, selfie maniacs, YouTubers that use the flippy screen to watch themselves and all of that. Not a big deal, but still. Now, don't get me wrong, the video in the back, I think I said it, is really good, so I'm not complaining about that. I'm complaining about the hinges and the mechanism that could have been better. the car slots after 2 years. You're gonna call me crazy, but after 2 years, I think this camera will be better with two CF Express Type B slots, because those have become cheaper and faster than the V90 cards. And so there's basically no reason to stick with the SD cards. Now, to be completely fair to Fujifilm, when they designed the camera, they couldn't know that the market was going to go that route. They couldn't know that the V90 SD cards would be much more expensive than same size CF Express Type B card. Back then, however, it made sense. You wanted to make the transition easier for people that already had SD cards. The camera overheated on me a few times, 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 in specific environment. But honestly, in 2 years, that's a decent record. I mean, I wouldn't consider the overheating something to be worried about. It overheated on me while I was doing 4K 120 under the sun and 35 degrees. And I was also screen recording with externally to another monitor. And also it overheated on me. It gave me the warning on overheating while I was recording videos here in the studio. I don't have air conditioning. Sicily is very warm, and a few times when it was very warm, the camera overheated on me. All of those are far from being a deal breaker. Like, there's none of the things that I just mentioned is a deal breaker. It's not even close to being a deal breaker for me, of course. If for you one of those is a deal breaker, of course you're not going to be interested in the camera. But I believe for the vast majority of people, those are not going to be deal breaker at all. Now, of course, I didn't forget the big asterisk on this conversation, which is the autofocus. Now, let's get real. The autofocus on the X-H2s was very good, not up to the best competition like Sony and Canon, but it was very good. And don't forget that, but we're going to talk about later, Fuji was the first one to come up with some tricks. However, as you all know, the latest firmware kind of broken, especially the continuous autofocus with face tracking. That is the most glaring of the issues. And so it needs to be mentioned, but also I still think they can fix it because it was better before. So they should be able at some point to revert back to the situation of a couple of firmwares ago where everything was working fine. So it is an issue, but I believe it's a temporary issue. I won't dive too much into this. I already discussed at will about that issue in my previous video, so go watch that one because I don't want to repeat myself over and over again. Let's talk about the standout features, because still nowadays, after 2 years from its launch, some of the features still stand out. And not all, but the vast majority of those are connected to the stacked sensor. This is the only camera in the APS-C full frame market that is fully stacked, under $3,000. There's nothing like that. And that stacked sensor makes a huge difference in what you can do with this camera. That sensor is a 26 megapixel sensor, allows you to shoot 40 frames per second in continuous shooting with autofocus, blackout free and without crop in RAW. It also allows you to have the pre-capture, pre-shooting, pre-whatever, call it whatever you want. The only thing that I can complain about is the fact that it goes for a full second before, and that is usually too much. It would have been nice to be able to like dial it down a half a second or even less than that, or a number of frames. That would add some flexibility to the system. But anyways, it can shoot 40 frames per second pre-shooting with RAW. And this is still something unheard of in this price range, even 2 years later. There are basically no rolling shutter, or you gotta look for it very carefully. The readout of this sensor is incredibly fast. It gets you very high dynamic range, despite the fact that we know that usually stacked sensor suffer from a kind of drop of dynamic range because of the structure of the sensor. In this case, it doesn't look like the dynamic range has been affected a lot. It was kind of similar to what the X-T4 can do, and you get crazy video specs. You get 4K 60 frames per second at super high bitrate with no crop. You can shoot 4K 120, yes, with a crop, but you can shoot 4K 120. You get 6.2K open gate. You get a lot of flexibility when it comes to codecs, and it comes to again bitrate and all of that. You can get pretty much whatever you want from a video perspective. The next two things seems like minor things, but they're not. You have a very straightforward selection of your focusing point, something that right now I'm shooting with Sony as well. I'm struggling finding a quick way to toggle between the autofocusing areas if I want to use the areas. I know the tracking, the algorithms, whatever, but sometimes you want to select the areas and it's not as flexible as what Fujifilm gives you. Super flexible. And again, the flexibility you have in video when choosing your frame rate, your bit rate, your codecs, everything is there, easy to read. You don't have to think in a weird way. You don't have to switch between PAL and NTSC if you want to go from 25 FPS to 24. It's just something that sometimes happens to me, and when I'm shooting with Sony, I need to remember that I need to go in one of the menu and switch between PAL and NTSC. In 2024, even 2022, makes no sense. The way Fuji does it is much better. It may be confusing at first because you have a lot of options, but once you get into those, it's super straightforward. And don't forget, with Fuji and the X-H2s specifically, you get incredible image quality when it comes to both video and photos. And that color science that we all came to love, and we all know it's one of the strongest selling point when it comes to Fujifilm stuff. The body, even the construction of the body is really good. It is big enough not to be too small, but it's not that big that you cannot, it becomes clunky in your hands. It's kind of the perfect size. It's easy to handle, but not too big. And yes, this is a departure from the usual Fujifilm type of bodies, but this camera was aimed at collecting new Fujifilm users from other brands. And it probably had to be like that with the PASM dial and all the other stuff to be an easy switch for those people. That needed to be like that to just win over people from other brands. And the camera succeeded, especially at the beginning. A lot of people were switching from other brands to Fuji for the X-H2s. So they did a great job with that. The viewfinder is very good. The battery life lasts very long. The reliability in my specific case was very good. I know that some people report that they've had reliability issues, but for me, the camera froze on me a couple of times, only a couple of times, and those were the same situation, same exact situation. Very low light, face tracking with flash, and most importantly, third-party lenses. The Sigma 18-50 in one case and the Tamron 17-70 in another case. But with Fujifilm lenses, the camera has never frozen me, and that, to me, is a great symptom of reliability. I didn't really have any reliability issue with this camera. I bet everyone's had experienced camera freezing on you. A couple of occasions do not count as an issue. And in general, in 2 years, I've been using this camera in every possible scenario: super warm weather, super cold weather, wind, rainstorms, windstorms, indoors, outdoors, concerts, landscapes, wildlife. I've shot everything you can think of, and it's never failed on me, and it's being a trusty companion for everything that I did. 2 years ago, when this camera launched, there was no competition at all. In this price range, again, below the $3,000 threshold, there was nothing that could come even close to that. Again, I'm referring to APS-C and full frame. I'm not referring to the micro four thirds. Sorry guys, I'm not expert on micro four thirds, and I believe that is a niche that unfortunately is probably going to die soon, but we'll see. Maybe Panasonic and OM System will surprise us. But APS-C and full frame cameras, there was nothing that could come even close to what the X-H2s could do. But even today, the competition still isn't as complete as the Fujifilm X-H2s is, despite being 2 years older. And despite the fact that the new cameras have been launched for pretty much all the brands with the exception of Sony. We're still waiting on the A7 IV. That camera may change the landscape of this price range. We don't know yet, so we'll see. We still have to see, but all the other competitors have come up with a version 2 of their camera, or 3 when it comes to Nikon, and still the X-H2s, in my opinion, is more complete than those. And let me explain you why. So let's frame the competition with these cameras. Panasonic S5 II and S5 IIX, Sony A7 IV, Canon R6 Mark II, and Sony Z6 III. The only one that comes close to the X-H2s is the Z6 Mark III because it's a partially stacked sensor, but none of the other cameras is stacked, and you will see that this changes what this camera can do. Some of this camera can have high frame rate in photo, but they sometimes have to go to JPEG to go to super high, or they cannot do the pre-capture with RAW. Fujifilm ensures you that those 40 frames per second are there without crop, without limitation of any sort. With others, none of them can go that fast, or if they go this fast, they have some limitation elsewhere. So for that, Fujifilm wins. When it comes to blackout-free shooting, none of them, with the exception of the Z6 Mark III, can shoot blackout-free. Then again, depending on what you're doing, may make a difference. Some of them cannot even get close to fast shooting, like the A7 IV, forget about it. The other are fast enough. I would argue 40 frames per second is even too much, but it's there if you need it. When it comes to video, none of them can do 4K 120, with the exception of the Z6 Mark III, which still, like the X-H2s, shoots 4K 120 cropped. The Z6 Mark III can do 6K 60 frames per second, while the X-H2s can only do 6.2K and 30 frames per second. And again, some of those cameras can do internal RAW. However, internal RAW in this price range may be a little bit of an overkill. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be wrong, but I don't know that many people would use internal RAW with cameras like this. Even from a flexibility standpoint, when it comes to codecs, videos, frame rates, and all that, Fujifilm gets you a huge range of choice that is also easy to reach. Some of the other cameras are more limited. Of course, some of them are better in some aspects. Like we know Panasonic does great when it comes to the stabilization and the video-specific features, like the exposure features, waveforms, all shutter angle, and all of that. We know that Panasonic does that, and for this reason, the S5 and S5 IIX more of a video cameras that can also shoot pictures, while I would consider the X-H2s a camera that was born to do both. Pretty much the only one that can fall in that category, together with the Z6 Mark III. Some of them do better, of course, with autofocus. Some of them do better with, again, the Z6 Mark III does the 6K in 60 frames per second. But overall, you don't get a package that is as complete as the one that you get with the X-H2s, even 2 years later after its launch, and even after the fact that pretty much everyone has updated their camera. Again, the Sony a7 V may change everything, but I doubt. Sony has to sell their top-end cameras, so they will have to cripple the capability of the a7 IV to some extent. Whether what they're going to cripple is going to make the difference whether this conversation changes or not. But as of today, end of September 2024, there's nothing that comes close to the X-H2s when it comes to a complete package. It is clear why back 2 years ago when the camera launched, a lot of creators got into the Fujifilm X system because of this camera. It was a camera that gave you high-end performance in a mid-range price in a flagship body. And also, we all know that the color science and the beauty of what you can get from an image quality standpoint from both video and quality and photos are something that people value a lot. Some people value a lot, and this is the reason why the X-H2s was a groundbreaking camera when it launched. It was a camera that was the first flagship camera that Fujifilm launched, because while there were cameras such as the X-H1, the X-T3, the X-T4, those were borderline flagship, but they were not 100% flagships. This one is. And so if they find a way to fix the AF algorithm that they broke with the latest firmware, this camera would still be relevant today, despite the competition upping their game. And it would still be the best bang for your bucks, again, if, and it's a big if, they fix that autofocusing issue that they introduced, because it wasn't like that before. This is something that is worth being mentioned. And let's be clear, a flagship camera, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, should not be considered old after 2 years. It should be normal that a flagship camera has a 4 years life cycle. Shouldn't be replaced that often. And if they fix that autofocusing system issue, this camera is still plenty capable of surviving in this fierce market, even in looking at 2026. Now, of course, the big question mark could be what the a7 V may bring to the table. If this camera leapfrogs everyone else, then this conversation changes. But as of today, I don't see a reason why this camera couldn't last 2 more years before getting replaced with a new model. And again, I'm not saying that based off of theoretical stuff. I've been using that camera for 2 years non-stop, and it's been a fail-safe option for everything that I needed to do. Never failed me. I was super happy with the result that I was getting. I was really happy. I would still recommend this camera in 2024, despite the thing that I said in the previous video. And again, if they come up tomorrow and fix the autofocusing, this camera would still be competitive for being the best bang for your bucks as a hybrid shooter. Now, of course, if you don't care about video, you have better choices in the Fujifilm system and outside the Fujifilm system. Same thing, if you care more about video and you don't care at all about photos, you may have better options elsewhere. You don't have better options in Fujifilm lineup for sure. But if you're a hybrid shooter and you're doing both, it's really hard to find anything better than what the X-H2s can do today, even 2 years after its launch. Thanks for watching. This video came up longer than I thought, which is something that bothers me. But anyways, thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.